Good morning, good morning, good morning. It is Friday, y'all, and it is Coffee Chats with Coach Candy. Welcome. Grab your coffee or your tea, your water, whatever it is that gets you up and rocking and rolling. Good morning, Deborah. Welcome. Happy Friday. It is the end of a rather long week, actually, so kind of excited it's Friday. Hope you all are doing well. I'm going to give everybody just a minute to jump on here. Awesome, awesome. How is everyone doing? Good morning, good morning. Yay. It's interesting, yesterday I posted the Facebook Live on the difference between satisfaction and fulfillment. And I have to say, didn't think yesterday when I started that conversation it would have so much interest and so much play around it. And I know on our Facebook Live yesterday, it got into the space of, you know, for some of us, satisfaction and fulfillment were two different ends of the spectrum, or, you know, kind of there were differences. Hey, Terry. And what was interesting, when I posted on LinkedIn, one of my friends joined in and she said, you know, we were just having this conversation. And so there was a third perspective that was brought in, because we had, you know, Martha, who was thinking that satisfaction and fulfillment were synonymous with each other. They were the same kind of words. Hello, Marv. Welcome. Good to see you, Marvin. And so we were in that space of, okay, are they synonyms of each other? Are satisfaction and fulfillment the same words, just different ways to say that? Or there was another perspective yesterday that said, no, they're different things. Satisfaction's more that space of contentment. Fulfillment's more that visceral kind of open space. And what was interesting is when I posted it on LinkedIn yesterday, I got some play from another group of people, I guess, that were having a similar conversation, that they actually found that they were in the same spectrum. It was just a progression, that satisfaction actually was the beginning progression of fulfillment. So I just think that's interesting. Again, it goes back to the fact that there are so many different ways you can look at things. And oftentimes what we perceive to be the truth is one way to look at any given situation, one way to look at anything that might be going on around us. And there's always different points of view. And what's interesting is, even though I know what I believe in that space and how I choose to define those words, I'm really open to the fact that there's so many different perspectives looking at what those meanings could be and what those words really are. And so just interesting, yesterday it was just kind of me pulling something out of the hat or other places to have a conversation, and it turned out to be a really deep dialogue in multiple spaces. And so you never know, right? Which leads me to today's topic. And for those of you that know, I am a huge Wayne Dyer fan, huge fan of The Shift. And one of the things he says in there, it's actually when they're sitting around hair's sitting up, sitting around the picnic table after they're sort of talking about not understanding the depth of what he's talking about. It's at the early part of the beginning. He asks the questions. He says, are you living an inspired life? Do you live an inspired life? And so I thought that would be an interesting conversation to have on a Friday. It's been kind of a heavy week. And just as a side note, if you don't know, right now, yesterday, the day before, and today, there are some significant geomagnetic forces and energy at play. We actually have some solar storms going on the sun, and they were at like a G1 level. They're now at like a G2, G3, which, if anyone's been feeling very dense or is suffering from some unexpected fatigue or even like really pressure headaches, it might be due to that. I know I woke up this morning and almost to the point where I feel like I have a migraine. Hey, Mateo. But there is absolutely, it's a very rare phenomenon. They don't happen very often, and there are geostorms that are happening and solar flares that are happening right now. And there's parts of the world where there's actually things from space that actually could touch Earth. But just know there is a geomagnetic force right now that through today, I think it ends today. I think it's a 3-day storm. That if you're feeling a little weighted down on a Friday, which usually should feel really open and expansive, that might be the culprit. There is definitely some very intense energy right now, and I can feel it all through the frontal vortex of my brain or my head. And like I said, last night I went to bed with just a massive headache, and woke up with pretty much the same. So could be something else. Just throwing that out there. So anyway, let me ask the question. do you feel you're living an inspired life? And do you feel that you're inspiring others? And so before we can even answer that question, right, let's talk a little bit about what inspiration is. And similar to the conversation we had yesterday about satisfaction and fulfillment, I want to know where you think inspiration arises, because there's kind of two trains of thought. That inspiration is something that happens in your mind. It's you get an idea, you're inspired, so you get motivated, it's more of a mindset motivation space, that when you're inspired, it's creating that ability to take action. There's other I guess pathways or other thoughts that is inspiration comes from more of a heart and soul space. And so I'm interested, as you think about inspiration, as you think about, and could it be both? I guess that's the third train of thought, right? Is it a head space? Is it a heart space? Or could it be both? And does it have varying degrees along the spectrum in terms of what inspires us? So I want you to think about for a moment what inspiration really means to you. Is it that space of motivating you to take action? So it's an idea drops in, you're like, ooh. Or is it something that is more of an awakened feeling that says, I don't know why, but I need to be in this space. I'm feeling compelled. I'm feeling like I'm wide open and needing to push forward. Or is it something entirely different? So I'm curious, because again, this is one of those that while I have my train of thought, as I listen to other people or as I go out and look at different things, I think about how there might be more than one way to look at this, right? There's different perspectives. And so just always kind of out of curiosity, wanting to explore these questions, these opportunities. And so when you think about inspiration, what does that look like for you? Some people attribute inspiration as that's the success in their life. And I think about, there's a great poem from Ralph Waldo Emerson that's about success. And at the very end, he says, to know that one life has breathed easier, this is to have succeeded. And it's one of my favorite poems. It actually is framed in the entryway to go to my bedroom because it's always been one of my absolute favorite poems. And so I think about, is that inspiration to me, to know that one life has breathed easier, or does inspiration stem from a different space? And so I'm curious, for those of you that are on, would love to hear you weigh in a little bit. I personally think there's a combination of inspiration, and I have something in my eyeball right now, excuse me. Thank you for being patient as I'm playing with my eye. So I think it can be kind of a spectrum type space. I think we can have inspired thought, as well as an inspired space of knowing, an inspired space of feeling like we're dropping into our purpose more, an inspired space of feeling deeply connected to our purpose, to our passion, to our calling in life, that is more of a visceral, open, heart, soul space than it is necessarily a head space. And I think for me, inspiration shows up in both spaces. Like, I get thoughts that are like, ooh, that's such a great idea, that I feel inspired by that. I feel like there's a need to take action. And there's times where I just truly feel it in my body. That being said, I think more of it is coming from that being connected into who you are, being that connected into that alignment space, right? Where you're kind of like dropping in, right there. And so I think about, and it was interesting because again, the question just kind of posed itself this morning. I watched The Shift a lot, and I asked myself that a lot. But this morning, for whatever reason, the question made itself kind of front and center and available to say, do you feel you're living an inspired life? Do you live an inspired life? And I was thinking about that. I'm like, yeah, I would say for the most part, I feel I'm living an inspired life. And do I feel like I do that every day? Do I feel like I'm inspiring others at the level that I could be? Am I taking an opportunity to find inspiration for myself, right? And so as we think about that, it's that opportunity to kind of lean in and ask yourself, are you living an inspired life? What does an inspired life look like for you? And again, it might go back to the conversation that we talked about yesterday, which is, what's the difference between satisfaction and fulfillment? Is it a space of, does inspiration and fulfillment, are they connected? Are they different? How do you know if you're living an inspired life? And so these are the questions that I'm just throwing out there as you're going into a nice weekend where, it's an opportunity to rest and recharge and start to do some reflection. And as you know, we've talked about many times, when you're closing out your week, when you're getting through. Fridays are a good space for reflection, right? It's a good space to keep the gas on the pedal, or the pedal on the metal, the pedal to the metal, so to speak, and keep the gas going, because it's not the space to cop out, but it's also not the space to create and do a lot of new stuff. It's the space to bring everything back together in a way that says, how have I shown up the way I need to this week? What are the metrics that I was trying to put out there to say, am I hitting these targets? And to reflect in terms of, how did you show up? How did you serve? And how are you leading this week? Fridays are really that space so that you can close out what you did or didn't do this week and set yourself up for coming into a new week with the right priorities, the right focus, so that you can go in and create that space over the weekend for rest and recharge. And now your weekend might be different days of the week, depending on what kind of work you do. And it's important that we have at least one of the days over the weekend where we can drop in and really allow ourselves that reflection. And so one of those things to ask yourself is, did I live an inspired life this week? Did I live from an inspired place this week? Am I showing up in alignment with that? Am I showing up at the highest and best level that I can? Mateo, in this spectrum, Religion on Net covers a lot of this ground. We're being the best possible version of yourself, and in general, helping those that are able to be helped. We by action and example inspire others. Yeah, I agree with that. I do think that us showing up in our own authenticity, I think sometimes it's not about the effort to inspire. I think it's about the effort for us to be in alignment and show up in a congruent manner, that we are in a knowing space of who we are, and we're showing up in the entirety of ourselves. When you do that by default, simply by you showing up and by serving at your highest and best capacity, I truly believe that you are inspiring those that need, however you're showing up, because it's that space of becoming the lighthouse, right? When you can get so fine-tuned to say, I am a lighthouse that is calling forth these boats, these people, these communities, when you get so grounded and centered in that light just shines, and you naturally draw people into that space. And I think that in itself is inspiration, when you can easily connect people into that sense of who you are, that sense of being that authority around you and your authenticity, you and your vulnerability, you in that space. And so I agree with that so much, that I think by our actions and example, and how congruently we show up in a space of who we are, we can naturally inspire others as a result. And so sometimes I think it's easier, and maybe there's some disagreement with this, sometimes I think it's easier for us to inspire others than it is for us to necessarily feel inspired. And so I want to ask that question as well. Is there a difference? Can you inspire others when you yourself are not feeling or being inspired in your entirety, right? I think some of that comes back to, what does it mean to be inspired? What does it mean for you to live an inspired life? Are there things that are meaningful for you that if they aren't present, you're like, I don't know if I feel inspired in my life. I think I need these things. And so I think about some of the things I surround myself with, right? Music, the kinds of movies that I watch, the people that I hang out with. And I think about, sometimes I'm not necessarily feeling inspired from me, and I'm choosing to fill myself up with things that are inspirational around me. And sometimes we need to draw on other things and their energy, even though we have that opportunity to say, just like happiness, we create our own happiness, right? What does that really mean? And so the question that I really want you to ponder and think about as you're closing out this week is, are you living an inspired life, for whatever that means for you? Are you feeling like you are inspired on a regular basis? Are you feeling like you're in a position to really be standing in your own authenticity, in your own space of clarity and purpose, that you feel you're inspiring others as well? Do you feel your actions and what your examples are modeling what you want to give to other people? And do you feel that there is inspiration in that space? And so again, I don't have, I have a couple different thoughts in this space, but it was more a question to say, do you feel like you live an inspired life? Or do you feel like something's missing? And if you feel like the answer is no, I'm not really living an inspired life, then what would it take? What does it take for you to move into a place to say, then what do I need so that I feel inspired? So that I personally feel my life is more on purpose. My life is more from a place of fulfillment and maybe satisfaction. It depends on how you view those words, right? So what is it going to take if you're not in a space right now that you don't feel like you're living an inspired life, that you don't feel like you're playing in a way that says I'm at my best and highest capacity? What do you need? What do you need? And what I want you to do is on this Friday where you're in a space of reflection, going into this weekend and thinking about, okay, what do I need to recharge myself? What do I need to energize and bring something in for me? Where's your inspiration coming from this weekend? Where's your inspiration coming from, both from yourself as well as other things that are available to you out there? And if you are not feeling like you're living an inspired life, what's it going to take for you to do that? Because think about it on the other end. And a lot of times when I work with my clients, we'll get into a space of, I don't know if I can do this. I don't know if I have enough courage. I don't know if I can step into the arena. The other side of the equation that you always need to look at is, then what's it costing you not? So if you are in a space where you're like, I don't feel like I'm living an inspired life, I want you to ask yourself, what's that costing you? Is it costing you something not to be? And so sometimes the only way that we can step out of whatever's comfortable or step out of whatever's holding us back is to not ask, am I doing this, or do I have the courage to do that? It's more to ask yourself the question, what's it costing me if I don't? And so right now, I want you to lean in this weekend. I want you to lean in today and ask yourself, this is a personal question. This is a space between you and yourself and your spirit and whoever that is in your maker, to say, am I living an inspired life? Do I feel like I'm living an inspired life? And if the answer is yes, great. And then say, then what is showing up in my life that makes me feel like I'm living an inspired life? So you can be more purposeful, intentional, and keeping that front and center. Because that's the other thing. Sometimes we say yes and we don't know why. And so if your answer is yes in that space, what I want you to do is I want you to say, then why am I feeling inspired? What is coming into my life? What am I drawing on? What am I using as my fuel for my soul that's keeping me feeling like I'm inspired? And how do I keep that front and center at all times? Because life happens and it gets easy to get off course. If, however, your answer is no in any capacity, I want you to say, what would it take to feel inspired? What do I need to live an inspired life? And the bigger question, what's it costing me by not? And we think about the value of a day. We think about the value of a week or a month or a year. And many of you know, I talk about, the idea of the dash, right? We have 2 points that are the same for all of us, not the actual dates, but we all have 2 things that are alike. We have a birth date and we have a death date, right? It's just a reality of human nature, is that we have a space where we come into this world and we have a space where we exit this world, at least the physicality of who we are in our human form. And so when we think about that, there is a space in between those 2 endpoints. And it's the dash. It's the dash, which is your life. And for most of us even on these calls, when you look at what the average lifespan is in the world and in the US, and right now the US is ranked like number 27 in terms of life expectancy, and our life expectancy has actually gone down. It's sitting at like 78.6 right now. I know as someone who's 46 years old, I am over the halfway point, if that's the reality. And I know in my family, I haven't even had anybody that's made it that far. And so while I am pretty insistent on I'm going to be the first one to break through that barrier, the reality is there's history in my family where no one's even made it to 78.6. And when you think about that, you think about the amount of time left for you to be in this space to do the work that you're doing and to not live an inspired life. What is it costing you? And I know it's kind of a really deep thought for a Friday, and I don't care if it's a Monday or a Friday or this or that. I want to have a space where we get honest with ourselves and we get real. What are you waiting for? If you're not living an inspired life, isn't it time for you to figure out what that looks like for you? Isn't it time for you to step up and claim that for yourself? Because the sands through the hourglass are constantly draining, and that the time is ticking by, and it's one of those things we never get back. And when you think about your legacy, your living legacy, and how you want to show up in this world, typically that comes from a space that inspires you. Typically that comes from a space that says, this is meaningful for me. And so if it's even, you're like, I don't know what living an inspired life looks like, then maybe change the frame to say, am I living a meaningful life? And I want you to think about, do you feel your life has meaning right now? Do you feel like your life is on purpose, that you're living a meaningful and inspired life? And the thing is if you're not, it's not that I want you to beat yourself up. It's not that I want you to get all, what I want you to do is I want you to reflect. I want you to get into a space to say, then what would that require? What do I need to do for me to capture that for myself, to claim that for myself? How do I invite that in? And what's it costing me when I don't? What happens every day if I just show up running Groundhog's Day over and over again, and I'm in that space to just be status quo and content? What do I need to feed my soul? And what's it costing me when I don't? And so that's what I wanted to kind of share with you this morning, get you thinking as you're going into a powerful recharge weekend. We're coming off of some of this crazy energy right now. And like you can see, I can barely see right now. My eyes are quite, because my head is really got some pressure in it, and I'll be very happy when these solar storms pass, because I can very much feel it in my body. And that being said, I'm not going to let a little pressure, because even this morning I thought about it, I'm like, I don't know if I want to get on. I really am having a hard time seeing it. It's almost as if I have a migraine going on. And then I said, no, it's my space to stand up, that space of what inspires me, living the inspired life and being able to inspire others. And so sometimes we push through because we know that there's a space that's required for us, or a space that we're needed. And so how do we do that effectively and powerfully? And so that's what I want to leave you with on this Friday. Any other thoughts or questions? You guys are a little quiet this morning. So just curious, as I talk about and ask you the question, are you living a meaningful and inspired life? Anything showing up for you, anything you want to comment on, or anything you want to ask, give you just a space here for a moment. Otherwise, I am going to send you into a powerful weekend for you to spend a little time with you to ask some of these questions. So any thoughts or comments from the gallery hanging out there? Awesome. Well, I hope you all have an amazing Friday. I hope you tap into what inspires you. Tap into the source of where you draw on your own inspiration, where you feel like there's more meaning, there's more fulfillment in your life. And spend a little time to ask yourself these questions. Whether or not you're living a fulfilled, whether or not you're living a meaningful, whether or not you're living an inspired life. And if the answer is no, what do you need to move into that space? If the answer is yes, what are the things that are accomplishing that for you, and how do you make sure that they're front and center at all times? And then if the answer is no, asking yourself, what's it ultimately costing you by not being in that space? And so Mateo, thanks for the deep inspiration. This has triggered a lot of thought. Yeah, and I'm guessing that's why some of you are a little quiet this morning. You weren't expecting that for a Friday. And like I said, I woke up and just kind of the question that was standing in front of me. And so yes, a little deep thoughts. Who was the guy off Saturday Night Live that used to say, deep thoughts by Jack Hanley or whatever it was? I'm good enough, I'm smart enough, and gosh darn it, people like me. It's kind of that spot today. I want to leave you with a little something to marinate on, something you're going into a weekend which gives you some space. And sometimes we need the deep thoughts at that point versus when all of our life and the chaos and everything's going on. So I hope you'll lean into that a little bit. I hope you'll get curious and see what shows up for you. And in the meantime, just know I am still thinking about, we are on episode 89, which means we are getting very close to episode 100. And I think around that time, I'm going to change the time of these coffee chats so that I can invite more people in, my West Coast friends and some people around the world. 7:30 is really hard for people that are not Central and Eastern time. And so I am looking at either a 9 o'clock or a potential 11 o'clock so that I can still get early enough in the morning for a good amount of people, or evening, or hitting right around the lunch hour. And so love Jack Handy, that's what it was, right? Yeah. So any thoughts or comments, welcome those. But just know that here shortly we are going to be changing the 7:30 time to a different time so that we can invite more people to the conversation. I've had several people ask and say they would really like to be part of this, and that 7:30 or 5:30 for them does not work. And so I want to be mindful about how can we bring the people that want to be part of this conversation in to this conversation. So, oh, thank you for the, I love that you bring those links up as fast as I say them. Yes, I am good enough, I'm smart enough, and gosh darn it, people like me. And so that is your thought that I'm going to leave you with. You are good enough, you are smart enough, and gosh darn it, people like you. I love you. And so with that, have a phenomenal weekend, everybody. Hope you lean into these questions. Let this deep thought kind of marinate. And I will see you back here Monday morning for some more coffee chats with Coach Candy. I will talk to you all later. Bye.